Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to see an interesting Azure use case. The use case is load data from Azure SQL database to Azure Cosmos database container. Let's see the practical implementation. Before we get into the details, I highly recommend you to watch my previous video Azure Cosmos DB introduction, where I have explained the difference between SQL database and NoSQL database. I have explained in detail on what is Azure Cosmos DB and how to create an account, database, container and items. In this video, we will see how to load the data from Azure SQL database to Cosmos DB container. Here is my Azure subscription. First, let's see the SQL database and understand the source data that we are going to load. Here is my SQL database. Let me get into the query editor. I have my source table car details, which has 3 columns: number, company and car model. Let's see the data. We have some car companies and car models. Now let's get into the Cosmos DB account and create a database and a container. Let me go to the home page. Here is my Cosmos DB account. As a first step, I am going to create a database and container. Let me click New Container. I am going to provide my database name as CarDB and database throughput is manual. Now I am going to create a container T_car. I have to provide a partition key. I am going to partition the data based on the car company. My column name is company. Let me create my database and my container. My database and the container is successfully created. I'm going to load the data from the SQL DB. As a first step, let's go to Synapse Analytics and create a new pipeline. Let me go to Home and go to Synapse Analytics. Now I'm going to create a new pipeline. I'm going to name my pipeline as PL demo. In order to copy the data from Azure SQL database, I am going to import copy activity. In the source settings, I am going to create a new dataset pointing to the Azure SQL database. Let me go to source settings and create a new dataset. My source files are Azure SQL DB, Azure SQL database and click continue. I'm going to name my database as DS SQL database. Next, I'm going to create a linked service pointing to the SQL database. Let me name it as LS source SQL DB. Let me select my Azure subscription and the server name and the SQL database name and provide my credentials. Let me test my connection. The connection is successful. Now let's create the linked service. The linked service is successfully created. Now let's select the table name. My table name is car details and click OK. My source settings is completed. Now let's go to the sync settings. As a first step, let's create a dataset for the sync. Let me click New. My target is Cosmos DB. Let me select Cosmos DB for NoSQL and click Continue. Let me provide a name to my dataset, DS target Cosmos DB. Now let's create a linked service pointing to the Cosmos DB. Let me click New. I'm going to name my linked service as LS Cosmos DB and select my Azure subscription and my Cosmos DB database. Cosmos DB account and Cosmos DB database. Now let's test my connection. The connection is successful. Now let's create the linked service. The linked service is successfully created. Now let's select my container name. My container name is t_car and click OK. My sync settings is also completed. Let me validate my pipeline. The pipeline is validated successfully. Now let me publish all my changes. All the changes are published. Now let me run my pipeline. The pipeline is running. The pipeline ran successfully. Now let's go to the Cosmos DB container. Inside the items, we see that the data is successfully copied. Now let me query the data. Execute query. All our data is successfully loaded from Azure SQL database to Cosmos DB container. I hope you like this video and I'm sure that you learned something new today. If you do like this video, please consider to subscribe and I will see you in yet another interesting Azure use case. Thank you.